Good evening, and welcome to this regular meeting of the Helotes City Council. It is July 13th, 2017, and we are underway at 7 p.m. Tonight, we will start our agenda, as always, with the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance to the American and Texas flags. And tonight, Councilmember Massey will be doing the invocation for us, so if you would please stand for the invocation and pledges.
Dear Lord, thank you for another summer day, which while hot makes us appreciate fall, winter, and spring in Central Texas. Thank you for the rain that fell yesterday. We humbly ask for more. We also thank you for those who volunteer for our city, and especially those who came out to help at the city's Independence Day celebration. We ask for your continued blessings on our staff, elected officials, and fire and police departments. Tonight, we ask for wisdom as we deliberate during our meeting. Help us to make the right decisions for our community with courtesy and consideration. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Dave, is this your camera?
I put it where it was safe.
Oh. Okay, next up we have some recognition, a certificate of appreciation. Is there anyone here from Gateway Church? Y'all? Okay. If you would, just come up here and we will present you with this. What we're doing here tonight, Gateway Fellowship Church just built a new church over on not too far out of the city limits of Helotes, but they've always been very heavily involved in our community. They helped do a lot of the playground equipment back here years ago when we opened the playground in 2010, and they're just a great group of folks. And recently, or last month actually, they had a group of kids help clean up part of the city, so we wanted to give them a little certificate of appreciation. So I will read this, and then we'll get some pictures if you like. And this is Office of the Mayor, Helotes, Texas, Certificate of Appreciation to Gateway Fellowship Church Junior Explorer Program. It says, whereas Gateway Fellowship Church's mission is to help each person at Gateway believe in Jesus, belong to family, become a follower, and build God's kingdom. And whereas Gateway Fellowship Church's vision is to see people saved, healed, set free, discipled, equipped, empowered, and serving, which includes the completion of a discipleship program called the Junior Explorers, where the children learn to grow as leaders in the community and grow deeper in their relationship with Jesus by being part of the Gateway Fellowship Church's Adventure Kids organization. And whereas Gateway Fellowship Church's Junior Explorers program volunteered many hours and cleaned hundreds of pounds of trash and debris from the French Creek tributary at the Helotes Crossing drainage easement on June 14th, 2017. And now, therefore, I, Thomas A. Schoolcraft, on behalf of the members of City Council, and by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Helotes, Texas, do hereby present this certificate of appreciation to the Gateway Fellowship Church Junior Explorer Program for their dedication to the health and safety of the Helotes community and their commitment to the mission and vision of their church. In witness whereof, I hereunto set my hand and seal is affixed.
Awesome.
Very good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, just look at the camera here. Okay, next up, we have our citizens to be heard portion. This is where citizens can come up and speak to any topic. It is by state law that we cannot discuss that topic. And when you get up here, you would please state your name and address, and then the time starts, and you have 3 minutes to make your statement. We just have the one, Susan? Okay, we have one speaker tonight, and that is it Sandy Cox?
Sandy Cole.
Coe, Sandy Coe.
Yes, sir.
Come on up.
Good afternoon. Thanks for this opportunity to speak to you all. I'm a resident of Iron Horse Canyon, Stablewood. I've lived there about a little over 13 years. Wonderful community. Thank you all for what you do. The issue is the speed limit, the amount of speed the folks coming down off the hill, at the top of the hill, to where we try to get out at Stablewood. And they've been clocked at 45 to 60 miles an hour. We went around and we did a petition, and we went door to door and explained exactly like when you, like, used to, we had the rose bush out there. Thank you for getting rid of the rose bush, because you couldn't see. So you would have to get out past the stop sign to see people coming down the hill. And then many, many times, I would get out, they would be on the backside, coming down fast. So when we did the petition was door to door, and we explained it to folks. We said, this is what we're seeing, this is what we're, and I would say about 3/4 of the folks said the same thing, the same story I'm telling you all. And, you know, and then it went into the children at the school bus, because we talked to some kids that had, you know, right as you cross Iron Horse Way, the kids have to get up and cross that. And so there's the speed factor, and then the other factor is the two of the children, they were like teenagers, they said, they're not stopping when the bus is stopped. And so I think the 2 stop signs we were requesting are a little like 100 to 200, and I say, you know, if it saves one life, and I know there was a numbers deal that you all did, and thanks for the speed that you did it. That's what the issue is.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Next up, we have our consent agenda. And for those of you who are new to our meetings, a consent agenda is just a grouping of items that are considered routine by me and the staff, and they're presented as a grouping to council with the intention of having a motion and a second to approve all of the consent items. Tonight, there are 2, items 4 and 5. Council does have the prerogative to ask questions or ask to have an item pulled for full discussion and action with the rest of the items on the agenda. So I would ask, are there any questions on items 4 or 5 of the consent agenda, or any request to pull?
I have a question on the minutes, number 4. I'm not sure if I need to pull it or not. I just have a question about the absences. And, this is the first time I've ever seen where unexcused has been used, and I wanted to clarify what it would take to get an excused absence besides being sick. Do they have to call? How far in advance would someone have to call to get an excused absence, and for what reason?
Well, Rick and I were talking about today. Rick, would you address that, and then I'll tidy it up if we need to?
Included on your dais is the Municipal Law and Procedures Manual that talks about specifically what state law says with regard to absences of council members. And it's section 7.07 absences that says that there are 2 provisions where an excused absence can occur, and that's where the city council member is sick or the city council member has first obtained a leave of absence, essentially from the city council in advance. When they are sick, it does say that the council must excuse the council member because of illness of the member or family. But this procedure here doesn't define how one is notified that one is sick versus not sick. So I would assume that would be left up to council to determine how they would want to record that.
And this is not unusual. ACOG does this with their board of directors when someone is absent without notice, it's an unexcused, or if it's not something that's in compliance with the procedures. So we just decided to start doing this to keep better track of whether or not we're being notified, because a lot of times we're notified at the last minute with no real reason, or the reason is something other than being sick or being asked for in advance.
Okay, so, for example, if someone is, if it's a work-related absence and they know about it in advance and they tell you, this is for my work, I'm gonna be absent.
Like a lot of times you and some of the others have given us 2 weeks' notice.
Yeah, I give
Or
them
something
notice.
like that.
Yeah.
And so we're just trying to tighten it up a little bit rather than just have people not show.
Okay,
But those need, if we're going specifically with this section 7.07, those should be done in advance and placed on a prior council agenda. So
so if we know we're gonna be absent, we should just let you know, and then you'll put it on a council agenda, and then the council has to vote whether or not it's an excused or excused.
Yeah, and of course, there's always going to be exceptions to that if something comes up last minute, business related or something like that. But, going to the coast or going on vacation or something like that really isn't an excused absence. And so that's what we're trying to tie down.
And again, it only becomes an issue when it's 3 unexcused absences.
Yes.
Consecutively.
I got you.
So,
Okay. All righty.
Anything else?
No, that's it.
Anything? And we did make another correction on the minutes.
Excuse me, Mayor, I had a question about.
Go ahead.
I'm a little confused here. What are we going to do? Are we going to set up some type of ordinance or something to take care of this, to accept this 7.07? I don't understand. And also, it says in here that you're supposed to be fined $3 for each unexcused absence. Are we saying that we're accepting this right now, or what are we doing? I don't understand.
Actually, we just added that to the minutes. If you accept the minutes, it'll go like that. And then if whatever you guys want to do, we can go ahead and bring a formal agenda item to you, say, in the
Okay.
next meeting.
I see.
This was just a
So,
preliminary
okay.
volley.
So this is a preliminary deal, and we'll have to put it on the agenda.
I don't know that we have to, because
Well-
if it's unexcused, we're going to go ahead and name it like that. But if you all want to have it on a future agenda, we'll go ahead and put it on.
Okay.
I would state that it doesn't necessarily have to be on a future agenda because it's state law.
Yeah,
And
that's what I'm
general law
saying. We don't need an
municipalities-
ordinance.
Okay.
General law municipalities should be enforcing, or
I would
Type A
say
should-
that it would be probably better to amend our policies and procedures for council and make it clear in policies and procedures. It's already in there, but we can clean up the language. I'll have to go ahead and look at how it's written in our policies and procedures.
Okay.
So would a vacation that you know about way in advance, would that be an excused or unexcused? Or would that go before the council and they'd say, well, I don't know if I want her to go there, so I think it's
It's
gonna
up
be
to you guys. All
unexcused.
we're saying is, according to the code, there are 2 reasons that are listed as an excused. Anything other than that, at this point, we're considering unexcused, especially no notice given or very last-minute notice given. It's just common courtesy to let us know ahead of time, for you guys also.
Okay, okay.
Good.
And then on the minutes, also, we did make one change, and Rick, I don't see where that was. We added,
It's on the second page. under
yeah,
item 4.
Alex is the nay vote. So when we approve the minutes, when you make the motion to approve items 4 and 5, if you would show the amendments as to the designation of the absences and adding Alex Blue as the nay vote on that one item that you voted on for the variance.
Oh, I see, okay.
Okay? Any other questions? Request to pull anything?
Mayor, point of clarification. So are we placing the council policies and procedures on the next?
Are we what?
Are we placing the council policies and procedures on the next council agenda?
We'll talk
Incorporate.
about that.
Okay.
There's no direction now from council to do that, so I anticipate we'll look at it, and if there's a need to, we will. Okay, so back to the consent agenda, we would look for a motion and a second to approve items 4 and 5, with the amended minutes being the minutes that would be approved.
Mayor, I make a motion, we approve consent agenda items 4 and 5 with
We have
the changes to the minutes.
We have a motion from Buys. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Fredericks. With no discussion being requested, then we will call the question. All in favor of approving consent agenda items 4 and 5, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries 4-0. Okay, on our individual consideration items, first up, we have Bear Appraisal District Chief Appraiser here. Michael, come on up and introduce yourself, and you're going to make a presentation, I think, in reference to your response to our resolution, or whatever you're going to say.
I am, sir.
But give us your name, who you represent, and it's all yours.
My name is Michael Lemesquita. I'm the Chief Appraiser for the Bear Appraisal District. I've been the Chief at Bear Appraisal District for the last 14 years and a Chief for the last 22 years. I've had the pleasure, or the, I guess, pleasure, of being in the business for the last 36 years. Know a little bit about what I want to talk to you about tonight. First of all, I want to thank y'all for the opportunity to be here. Rick, thank you for sending me the email and giving me the heads up. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to y'all about this budget. It's a great departure from prior years' budgets that this council and every other jurisdiction in Bexar County has supported. Actually never had to do this before, but I appreciate the opportunity to be here nonetheless. You were talking earlier about how something y'all were just discussing was already a matter of state law. Tax policy for the state of Texas is what's driving this budget. Since 1997, the Bear Appraisal District and every other appraisal district in the state of Texas has had to deal with something referred to as equal and uniform appeals. This is a secondary appeal that taxpayers can bring that simply allows you to compare yourself or your property's value in relation to comparable properties appropriately adjusted, yada, 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 yada. This is a departure from the market value appeal, where you simply say, you've overassessed my property. Standard that the state holds us to is to appraise property in accordance to market value. A couple things I want to let y'all know. If you remove the items that this council objected to, the litigation, the arbitration, and the expansion of staff to accommodate another paralegal, this budget would have been just like every other budget, just around 2%. Instead, it's a 12% increase. The litigation that the Bear Appraisal District currently faces is not from homeowners. I have nearly $23 billion in litigation just from last year. Something on the order of $18 billion from the year before that, and $11 billion the year before that. In the first 7 to 8 years that I was here, we normally had $2 to $5 billion, and all of a sudden it just kind of exploded. This is much less to do with the values that the district places on property in terms of whether or not we're over-assessing commercial property or residential property for that matter. Nearly 100% of my litigation is equal and uniform. I want you to understand this because there's very little I can do about it. The statute says we're required to appraise property under Section 23 of the Property Tax Code at 100% of its market value. That is what a hypothetical sale would look like on January 1st for each of the 680,000 parcels in Bexar County, what it would sell for on January 1st. That's the market value. You can appeal that if you think we've overassessed that property value. You can go to the review board, you can go to non-binding arbitration, you can go to binding arbitration, or you can take me to district court. That's just a fact. Any property owner has that available to them. For most property owners, you have to be at least in a $3 million property to even think about suing me, because it doesn't make financial sense. Unfortunately, last year, the year before, our two biggest years in litigation involve almost exclusively commercial property. What the standard is for equal and uniform appeal, which can be found in 4226A3 and 43B3, that's the ARB and the district court statutes, is simply that you take the value of any given property, the appraised value, not necessarily the market value, the finally determined appraised value. That could be the value I send you a notice on. It could be the value after the appraisal review board. If that value is higher than the median level of values of however many comparables you choose, could be 6, could be 10, that's typically the range of property comparisons we see, appropriately adjusted, then that property owner is entitled to relief. Well, what that means, and I'm just going to use this as an illustration because I think you all know where the best hotel in town is, right? The JW Marriott. The JW Marriott gets to compare itself to, well, 2 or 3 other comparable properties and arguably a half a dozen other downtown hotels that simply aren't comparable. It is the #1 hotel in Bexar County. For a number of years, it was the #1 hotel in the state of Texas. It took the Valero Texas Open out of the hands of the Westin La Cantera. So we know it's better than that hotel. Essentially what that does is, this statute requires me to take the very best hotel, move it to the middle, or the median, if you will, of comparable hotels. So every hotel that formerly was appraised less than the best hotel is now assessed at higher than the best hotel. It's somewhat ironic that it is called equal and uniform appeals. This is a statute created by the Texas legislature in 1997. It's been expanded virtually every session since, including the current session, and talks of more expansion in the special session. What that does is it creates a spiral down effect of value. And so as you lower values based on this appeal mechanism, the next person in line simply wants to Me Too off the last value. So I actually have people that mine my data. Every time the review board makes a change on a commercial property, there's 40 or 50 people in town, companies in town, that are mining that data or making public information requests, in which case I have to hand them the data to file their next appeal tomorrow. And all this does is simply deteriorate the values. It doesn't equalize value. It simply deteriorates value on property. For years, I've argued with the legislature that all this does is shift the tax burden from the JW Marriott and other corporate taxpayers onto the backs of homeowners. This was passed as a homeowner-friendly initiative so that every homeowner, so that Tom Schoolcraft and the 50 people that live on your street that have very comparable homes are all appraised and assessed basically the same way, using the same comparables, adjusted for the same amenities, adjusted for the same negative influences, if there are any, et cetera. Because this commercial property takes advantage of this process, almost none of my litigation contends that I've overassessed their value. They all say they're unequally appraised. In the case of the $700,000, that's exactly 1/2 of what I actually needed. I'm at state at trial now with Lowe's Home Centers. This is national litigation. In 2008, 9, and 10, when the state of Michigan was depopulating, Lowe's was able to get a tax tribunal to lower their values to what we refer to as the dark store theory. You may have seen that in a local paper. In a nutshell, these guys contend that big boxes such as Lowe's, Best Buy, Target, Kohl's, you name it, all are built specifically for their use. And subsequently, there are no sales of these properties until they go dark or they're empty. That is, their highest and best use has changed. They've now become something other than what they were intended to be. We've seen this, I don't know if you recall where the Target is or was, at 281 and 410. When they built the flyover there, it killed that center. It sat vacant for about half a dozen to maybe 10 years. It's recently been redeveloped with secondary users. Long story short, Lowe's and every other big box, including H-E-B, Walmart, Valero, McDonald's, all these national chains and big boxes all deed restrict their property so they can never be sold to Mr. Frederick's should he decide to sell hammers and nails or hot dogs or hamburgers for that matter if it's a national franchise. All these properties are personally restricted by their corporate owners so that they can limit the competition. And so that's really why you don't see any of these things sell from Lowe's to Home Depot or Home Depot to Ace Hardware or anybody else. The fact of the matter is there's not one single Lowe's in the state of Texas that's ever closed. But Lowe's, when they came to Texas, we were supposed to be at trial in October of last year. Kind of glad it didn't happen because quite honestly, when appraisal districts lose in litigation, as we usually do, Section 42.29 requires me to pay attorney fees up to 20% of the tax savings not to exceed $100,000 for the plaintiff's attorneys. When I win, as I have with Lowe's of late, I get absolutely nothing, which isn't me, it's your money I'm spending. It's your citizens' money I'm spending, and it's Bexar County's money I'm spending. When I'm served a lawsuit, I don't really have any choice except to respond to it. These funds that we set aside in this budget, actually, our auditors had requested us to do this several years ago. My board and I resisted because every year, year over year, we've managed to actually send back money to the taxing units. Those days are probably over. As a matter of law, we either have to encumber those funds in a designated fund for the board to allow me to spend money on, or we have to return that money to you. The simple fact is, for the last 13 years, our budget has increased about $7 million, $7.5 million for the last 13 years total. 85% of that has been returned to the taxing units. We're not wasting money. But the litigation is such now that with the cost of litigation, even when I win, in the case of Lowe's, as I said, we were supposed to be at trial in October. They opted and forced me into a non-binding arbitration where Judge Peoples, Judge Payden, and George Brin were the arbitrators. I paid those guys $500 an hour for a week, each one of them. At one point, I looked at my attorneys. I hired my own attorneys. I brought in an appellate court attorney because I intend to take this to the Supreme Court if I have to. And I also brought in Lamont Jefferson. At one point, I had $1,600 an hour clicking on my own legal fees. But it's this important. Lowe's is not the first, and it won't be the last big box to try this. Kohl's tried it in Williamson County about 4 years ago and lost. They weren't quite as aggressive as Lowe's is being. We won that non-binding arbitration, hands down. It was unilateral. I got absolutely nothing for it. Opposing counsel said in openings, hopefully the appraisal district will live with the outcome of this appeal, assuming we were going to lose. As soon as we won, they immediately reinstituted their appeal to district court. Before we went into non-binding arbitration, which sounds kind of ironic, I mean, why would you go to a non-binding arbitration? It doesn't serve any purpose, except to test the water and see if it was hot or cold for them to proceed to court. Now that they've lost their non-binding arbitration, they're trying to reinstate the equal and uniform appeal because that's the easiest way to beat us. Their properties are not overappraised. According to our experts, according to the judges that heard the testimony. And so they want to try yet another bite at the apple, if you will, to shift their tax burden onto their customers and your homeowners. Bottom line is, we took them to Bexar County District Court last week, filed a partial motion for summary judgment to exclude their equal and uniform arguments because it's 3 years after the fact that they're trying to do this. You have to sue me within 60 days and state why you're suing me. We can't have a car accident and then you let me guess why you're suing me. So we won that motion, and so they're now faced with having to go to district court with me over market value, to which my non-binding arbitration by these three highly respected judges and one attorney, if you will be admissible in court. It's posted on the Bexar County Clerk's website now. Why is this important? We had a court case about 5 or 6 years ago in Bear County. $42.29, the tax attorney fees, if you will. If I lose an appraisal district case, I'm liable up to $100,000. That's the maximum per year per property in Bear County. That's a ruling out of Bear County. Lowe's has 10 stores for 2 years. That's $2 million, folks. I don't have $2 million in reserve. I have a 1-month reserve. We're in the process of trying to build a 3-month reserve. Last thing I want to touch upon, the second part of the increase in the budget was about $400,000 for binding arbitration. I want you to understand, this is not a partisan discussion. This is simple matter of fact. Senator Betancourt introduced a bill, and I forget which senator ultimately passed it, but it was introduced in a half a dozen different ways during the 85th session. This is one of the few things that did pass. When binding arbitration was passed, again, it was passed as for homeowners. So your value had to be $1 million or less, and it had to be real estate. A couple of years after they passed that, they expanded it to include business personal property. A couple of years after that, I think session before last, they expanded it from $1 million to $3 million. You don't have that many $3 million homes in Bear County, to be honest with you. This last session, Senator Betancourt, who is a tax consultant, that's his trade, expanded this from $3 million to $5 million. Why is that significant? Because non-binding or binding arbitration is a loser pay. All it says is, if Paul Fredericks takes me to binding arbitration and his value is, I say is $3 million, he says is $1.5 million, and the judge rules $1.7 million, well, that's closest to his number, so I lose. So whatever the filing fee is for a $3 million property, I think it's going to be around $1,200, a whole lot cheaper than going to court. You don't have to be represented by an attorney or have an expert. So subsequently, the appraisal district is forced to pay those fees every time we lose. There are 1,024 properties in the value range between $3 million and $5 million as of the end of last year. 98% of those went to the review board. I'm sure 98% of those will take non-binding arbitration or binding arbitration because it makes financial sense to do so. All your competitors are going to be doing it. Again, this was passed as homeowner taxpayer reform, making a fairer platform for homeowners. All this does is arbitrarily reduce commercial values based on, again, primarily equal and uniform appeals, not market value, to the detriment of every homeowner who doesn't get the same level of reduction. And I see it every day, folks. We had $1.5 billion at the board today. Not very much of that was homeowners. That's pretty much in a nutshell. I'm really open for questions. I don't want to keep you here all night, but I can tell you that Texas has a two-legged tax policy now. We have a property tax and we have a sales tax. That's where the majority of taxes are raised from. I know that the legislature is bent on limiting your ability to raise funds in your own communities. The fact of the matter is 55% of most Texans' home tax bill is school district taxes, not cities, not counties. All I can say is thank God for Speaker Strauss. I don't know how he'll get through this special session or the next session, but I do know he's the only one that actually has an eye on Bear County and homeowners and cities and schools. And we're not even that friendly. It's just a fact. Any questions?
Yeah, let me start with Cynthia.
So it's hard for me to be sympathetic because, as you said, the businesses are the ones who are rising these costs on the back of taxpayers. And of course, I represent the Hello to Citizens, and people, we're in the middle of appraisals, or we're finished. People are going through the appraisal process right now, and a lot of people are, it happens every year at this time.
Sure it is.
Everyone's very complaining, and the homeowners are complaining. And so basically, we're using partial of their taxpayer money to pay litigation that's going to affect them. And your response is that it's going to affect them if you don't defend these.
Much worse.
Yes, so I understand that. So I guess what you're saying then, it's the Texas legislature who's at fault for having tried to help taxpayers.
I'm not blaming them. I'm simply telling you that as a practitioner of 36 years, the legislature is uniquely at fault in this case.
Yes, yes.
And
And then
here-
again, it's the taxpayers, it's our fault for having voted for these people.
Or not voted.
Yeah, okay.
But I will tell you this. My plan in implementing this budget, first of all, let me just tell you, my board of directors is as conservative a board as you'll ever find. They are fine people who get paid not 1 cent to do what they do. They're prohibited by law from discussing any particular value that's not on the agenda. They cannot talk to me about values in Helotes or values on their street or values from their constituents if they have any. And I do have elected members on my board. My purpose in trying to set aside these funds is these are real dollars that I could very easily lose in 2018. I'm set for trial in March. I'm set for trial with USAA in November of this year. That likely will go up on appeal as well. USAA, quite frankly, we had $250 million on the largest single headquarters in the nation. It's the largest office complex in the nation. It's bigger than the Pentagon. They contend it's worth $133 million. If I lose any of these court cases, particularly Lowe's, because the cap is $100,000, up to $100,000 per parcel per tax year. So I have 10 Lowe's in Bexar County. If it's the full maximum, that's $2 million just for that case, not including my own cost, which that non-binding arbitration cost me $350,000 to win and get an attaboy. But if I get a court order that says, you lose, pay them their money, I have no choice but to amend my budget, and then you don't have a vote. We'll have to pay that money. And to give you some idea, the entire budget, if I simply didn't pay my staff, I didn't pay my utilities, I didn't do anything other than deal with litigation, I have about $15,000 to fight with per case. I have almost 1,200 cases. And decidedly, these are not all going to trial, but it only takes 1 or 2 to absolutely bust my budget, and I have no control over it. Any other questions?
Anything else?
No, I did want to just say that, I was the one who brought this up. It just bothered me that the taxpayers are having to pay for litigation it seems like against ourselves. And
Very few of those taxpayers that you're talking about are the ones suing me. And one thing I gave Rick kind of some talking points to kind of lay out the process for you. If I don't appraise, our job is to follow the market. We don't get to establish the market. You have homeowners in your communities that are setting record prices for homes. The average value of a home with a homestead in Helotes is almost $100,000 higher than the average in Bexar County. That's just a fact. But the fact is, if I don't follow that market and raise those values where they're supposed to be, the state of Texas forces the controller under section 403.302 of the government code to perform an every other year study of value to see if our values are within plus or minus 5% of 100. So 95 to 105% is considered within tolerance as far as the state is concerned. Why is that significant? Because under the state's funding formula, if a school district falls below that threshold, they get their state aid cut. The interesting thing is, under the current funding formula, and you don't have to believe me, it's on the controller's website and it's on the LBB. It's been there 2 years in a row and the legislature has absolutely ignored it. Every time a major metropolitan appraisal district raises values, the state of Texas contributes less. As values go up and local tax efforts rise, the amount of state revenue declines. Not dollar for dollar, but it's an insidious plan, and it works against the same people you're concerned about. This tax policy was created by a tax consultant.
You good?
I'm done.
Paul?
I guess the only thing that really concerns me is when the values increase, our revenue to the city increases.
Yes, sir.
And every taxing unit benefits from the rising values of the property, whether that's commercial or
Yes, sir.
or residential. And when that happens, we don't have to raise taxes on our citizens. We look like the good guys.
You don't have to raise the tax rate.
We don't have to raise our tax rate, exactly. And we're the ones that should be responsible to our citizens for being financially responsible for the taxes that we're collecting.
Sure.
And so we're benefiting from these ever-increasing values. And what bothers me is there's taxing entities out there that I think that are irresponsible with the funds that they're collecting. And they're not being held responsible. But they can go to their constituents and say, our tax rates are the same. We haven't raised taxes
Sure.
in years. We're the beneficiary of
Yes,
increased
sir.
values. And so you're not, the elected officials of those taxing entities aren't being held responsible.
I think that's part of what SB2 seeks to do by, in my opinion, I mean, I'm just a voter just like you guys are, but from a tax policy standpoint, I always thought that local government was the government closest to the people. That's what you always hear. It's been the mantra. I was a Republican appointee by then Governor Bush for 9 years to the Board of Tax Professional Examiners that oversaw the people that do what I do across the state. Not just chiefs, but every single licensed appraiser in the state of Texas. We seem to have taken a departure from that in quite a shocking way here of late. And it seems like the people that elect you for the jobs that y'all do is not as important as what Austin thinks. There was a senator from the Edinburgh area that had an editorial in the Rio Grande Valley. I forget which article it was. I read about 1,000 of them a day, it seems like. But I spent my first almost 9 years in the Valley as a chief, originally from Austin. And he said that it seems like Austin is becoming more like Moscow and doing all the controlling from one location. That's somebody's political position. All I know for a fact is you can't lower your tax rate enough to compensate for the value increases. Again, that's not on you and it's not on me. It's on what's happening in the market. Tax policy is created at the state level. Market value is the standard. In every other state in the nation, every state in the nation has property taxes that are based on market value, if they have them at all. But they also have an equal and uniform appeal. But unlike Texas, every single one of those other states that has both types ties the equity appeal to market. For the last 2 sessions, I've introduced a bill that simply says, in no case can the finally determined equal and uniform value be less than 90% of the finally determined market value. That's a 10% limitation below whatever market is, period. Stop these 40, 50% reductions, because that's what's happening. Every time a major office, hotel, apartment, you name it, whatever kind of property it is, sells in Bexar County or in Dallas County or in Travis County or in Tarrant County or in El Paso County or Houston, every time they sell, it's always at about 40 to 50% on the dollar is what it's on the roll for. That's not by accident, folks. That's a systemic policy issue. It's not the appraisal district's policy. It's the policies that we're subject to, just like you are, just like your taxpayers are. And I tell you, I've had my job threatened by 6 different elected officials. Quite frankly, I don't care. I know that during this session, they plan on making my position an elected position. If they do, you'll have somebody else to talk to next year, because I don't have the guts to do what y'all do. I'm not going to get out there and run for office. I don't have to.
You good?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Bert?
Michael, thank you very much for coming out here and explaining this, things to us. My first question is, did anybody else disapprove the budget, any other city?
No, it's never happened.
It's never happened?
No.
We're unique?
Y'all are very special.
Okay. No. Anyway, I'm sorry, I just had to ask because you're taking a lot of time to explain these things to us. I know you're a busy man, but it's
You
never
guys pay
happened.
you guys obviously pay our budget, you pay my salary. I was gonna make this additional offer to you. When you do these town halls, I do them for the city of San Antonio, I do them for Bexar County, I do it for individual council members, I do it for school districts, and I'm happy to do it for the city of Helotes. If y'all have a public function where you want me and/or my staff and/or a group of us, or just me to come out for a luncheon, I'm good for it. Y'all got good big trees, I'm 260 pounds, I'm sure they can string me up. I'm happy to answer their questions. Most people just want to be heard. Here's the truth. We have almost 102,000 appeals this year. 83% of those appeals are in the hands of commercially paid tax consultants. 80% of the homeowners that appeal are not showing. They're not showing for their hearings. I'm paying ARB members to sit there and do nothing because they're scheduled. And we're scheduling 1,800 people a day.
Well, I disagree with you. I think you could run for office. Anyway, I had one other question, and this is probably, it's a very bland question, but when you actually win a court case, you do not get to collect lawyers' fees. And why is that? Is that a state law, or is that because you're a public entity, or what?
Section 4229, it's the only civil litigation that has that stipulation.
Oh, really? Okay.
Likewise, if Paul's an attorney and he is representing Tom, and Tom and I have a car accident, he's got to stipulate in his lawsuit against me what he's suing me for. Appraisal districts get sued. We oftentimes don't know until we get to mediation what the lawsuit's about.
Wow. Okay, that's all I have.
That's law.
Alex?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much for being here. I think
Yes,
we
sir.
should rather invite you to a luncheon instead of a luncheon. But I do appreciate it. I also, having sat here, I'm still the junior member of council, even though I've been here 7 years, and I can tell you how many times our citizens have come up here and said, don't let that business over here because it will hurt my property value. Don't let that happen because my property values will go down. And yet they're the first ones sometimes in line to say, oh my God, they need to have it lower. When in fact, everything else they do in their life is trying to boost that value higher and higher and higher until they get your bill. And so I think it's sometimes ironic. I'm disappointed, as I think we all are, that it's the commercial entities that are seeming to drive this rather than the residential side of things, which maybe we have it backwards. But thank you again for your time. I appreciate you being here.
Thank y'all very much. I do want you to know that I do value what you guys think. My invitation is open. I'm never unavailable. I'm going to leave you my business cards. I know Rick has all this stuff, but this is my direct phone number, my direct email. I hand it out every time I meet with a taxpayer. I'm not overwhelmed. We have 680,000 parcels. I never make folks make an appointment to see me. If I'm available, I see them. I spent all day on the floor at the ARB today because we had $1.5 billion scheduled. Unfortunately, a big chunk of that didn't show.
Well, I, for one, will appreciate your direct line, because I've tried to get with you a couple of times, and it's hard to
Let me give you
find
my
you.
cell number.
Okay, good.
210-392-3043.
I don't need it right now. But I do have a couple of comments also for you. And this is just from my perspective. People that I talk to that are very frustrated over their values, I often kid that pretty much anybody who can multiply by 1.1 times the previous year's assessed value can determine what the next year's assessed value is going to be, because it seems like on our property this year, for instance, our homestead, the market value went up 44%. And then, of course, the assessed or appraised value only went up the max of 10.
Right.
And it seems like every year that magic cap of 10 is hit. 2 years ago, I was down at your office talking to 3 folks plus your appraiser, and I commented that. And the appraiser said, well, it's dictated by state law that we increase 10%.
It is.
And I said, "No, I think you're wrong. That's the cap. There's nothing that says you can't go up 1 or 2% or 0.5% or leave it where it is." And I think that's the frustration, because a lot of people get their bills each year or their notification of the appraised value, and they'll see market value, they'll see assessed value, they'll see appraised value, and there's one other on there that I can't seem to pull up in my mind, but it seems like they're interchangeable. And a lot of folks that are out there, I can tell you, get very confused and intimidated because they don't know what's going on with their statement. And I think if you have an 80%, I think you said, rate of the folks that set up an appeal don't show up, I think it's probably because they feel it's a hopeless cause. I know I've sat down there and argued in front of 3 folks and your appraiser about comparables, because many times in your evidence packet, the comparables are a year or more old.
Right.
And you know as well as I do, a comparable that's a year old is not a valid comparable.
Actually, the state uses a 16-month window, and when they test
Yeah, I
our
know.
values, but it works in your favor, because right now, values have gone up exponentially for the last 5 years.
I understand, but still, it's not always, the evidence packet is not always real clear.
That's
And
true.
maybe there are times when an older comparable works, but it's still not a fair shot of what the market's doing. So I think that's just part of what adds to the frustration. I know it does for me.
Sure.
Because I sit there and look, well, there's no way, I don't care what evidence you have, that you could say that a home and a lot went up 50%, say, in market value, when all the figures say, what, 5%, 6% maybe? And then you're still going up to the 10% on your assessed or appraised value, and that's what the tax is based on. Some years you go online and you can appeal, and they ask for your opinion, your being the property owner's opinion. Sometimes it seems like they take that into consideration, but most times not. So you have the option of either declining that offer or accepting that offer. If you decline it, then you have to go down in front of the board,
Right.
and it's like rolling the dice. And I'm just telling you from my perspective, the way I feel, and I'm sure that's how most people feel. And regardless of how many commercial properties and the value of commercial properties out there, there's still a lot of residential folks that are fighting for every dollar they can save on their property values. So I can appreciate your position, but hopefully you guys and the legislature will appreciate the property owners' positions too, that it doesn't always have to go up the max 10%, and that happens almost every year. So whatever feedback you have there, just have at
It's
me.
real simple. My appraiser inarticulately told you that it's mandated, or it's the law. Section 2301 requires us to appraise property at 100% of market value. That's number 1, period. Whatever values, whatever sales indicate, that's the value we have to aim at, plus or minus 5% as far as the state's concerned. But then we have this cap, which is one thing that the legislature did do in an attempt to try to limit increases in huge value swings, because this phenomena has been going on. I mean, it went on in the late 80s, then we had an oil bust and an S&L crash, and then I almost owned 640 acres right near Helotes. At least my wife would have signed a note with me from the RTC. The truth of the matter is, when property values go up, property values escalated so much over the last 3 or 4 decades that the legislature intended to put an artificial cap of 10%, not unlike what California did with Prop 13 and their 2% cap. This cap doesn't require us not to appraise property at market value. That's why you see that high number. Whatever the market is what
Right.
it is. The cap simply goes up 10% automatically if we've not reached that 100% threshold. That's still test number 1. The second test is, if you're in a $100,000 home, You're appraised at $100,000 that year, the next year it can't be more than 110. If the value goes up to 200,000 market value the next year, I don't know, they expanded Bandera Road or something, or built you a double-deck highway and it did good things for your value. It could go to 300,000. Your next year value still can't be more than 121 as far as what you pay taxes on. It will eventually get to that number. Keep in mind, during the recession in 2008, 9, 10, and unfortunately even 11, our values remained pretty much flat, residentially and commercially. But my litigation still went up. I had more litigation every single year because of this. I refer to it as a four-letter word, folks. I'm just a taxpayer like y'all, and I don't like the fact that I have to pay $8,500 a year to live in my house because I still pay a mortgage on my home for another 5 or 6 years. But the legislature requires 100% of market value, and then they allow these two appeal mechanisms, one of which, if you're over market value, you can appeal that. But if you can play this shell game and prove that your property is unequally assessed compared to other assessed properties, this is such a random created scam. The Appraisal Institute that governs what fee appraisers in the nation do don't sanction this because it's too subjective. There's no way to tell if Mike's a liar or not. It's just that simple. And Texas has been doing it. This is our 20th anniversary doing this. This isn't new, but it's been expanded every single year. That cap, I used to be absolutely opposed to the cap because it benefits the highest value property first. Thank God we have it, because I'd have a lot of homeowners who wouldn't be able to afford their taxes right now. And I know there's a lot of them that are struggling with it as it is. I read an article just the other day, I think it was out of the Perryman report, that said the average tax bill on a residential property in the state of Texas is now approaching $3,500, average. Just think about that in terms of San Antonio. That includes Helotes, Alamo Heights, the Dominion, West San Antonio, South San Antonio, and East San Antonio. That's a crazy average. In Austin, Texas, the average value of a home in the city proper is $400,000. There hasn't been a home available for sale in Austin for under $200,000 in the last 24 months. People can't afford that. But that's one of the two-legged stools that this state manages its tax policy with, sales tax and property tax.
Right, yeah, true. But I don't know how you're ever going to get rid of the frustration a lot of people feel.
You
I do
can't.
think that, and I don't know if that would be done through the legislature, but I think the appeal process needs to be simplified so that people will understand that they even have a chance to go down there and appeal. And then I think they feel like if the appeal goes against them, their only option is to go to court, and that's only good until the next appraisal shows up, and then you got to do the whole thing again. So I think everybody has that feeling of frustration and hopelessness as far as going down and protesting.
All the attorneys are getting rich. All the attorneys are getting rich. My dad used to always say that American laws are written by American lawyers for
Yeah.
American lawyers.
Oh, yeah, yeah. But anyway, I too appreciate you coming out, and I would like to sit down and visit with you on some thoughts.
Anytime.
And we'll give you a call.
Mayor, I
But,
have two questions. Do you mind if
go
I
ahead.
ask you? Has there been any discussion amongst appraisal districts about combating the rising costs of the school property tax portion of people's individual bills? Because that seems to be the part of the tax bill that nobody wants to go after, because then you look like you hate children in schools and all of these sorts of things. But really, that's the largest component of everybody's bill. So has
I
there...
think everybody in the legislature must hate children. If they didn't, I mean, look, folks, the original Texas public school finance lawsuit came out of San Antonio, Texas, Edgewood, 40 years ago. This isn't something that happened last year. It happened before I even got into this business, and I've been in it for 36 years. If they don't have a problem with children, apple pie and motherhood, then why haven't they fixed it? The courts have told them repeatedly. You have, I think, a Benzathine system now. I don't even know what that means. All I know is that we have rich school districts that are able to afford X. We have poor school districts that are not able to afford X. And the truth is, we try to equalize that by redistributing the wealth, which is what I think everyone's opposed to, yet at the same time, it seems to be fine for the last 4 decades. That's not a policy issue that appraisal districts, and I'll be real honest with you, I tell homeowners every single time, 2 homeowners are more influential in front of any committee at the state legislature than any 2 chief appraisers on the planet. If you were a city administrator or city manager or a fire chief or a police chief, and you spent any time during the 85th session in Austin, tell me how you felt. Disrespected, disenchanted, disrespected is the word. They don't care. I'm just a taxpayer. I'm no different than anybody else.
My second question, has there been any discussion about lowering that cap from 10% to,
There have always been 10 to 15, 20 bills. There's, I think, 7 or 8 filed in the special session trying to lower it to 5. There's also one that wants to lower it to 5 on all taxable property, business, personal property, commercial property. Now, let me tell you, neighborhoods and residential property typically follow a trend. It's either going up, or it's going down, or it's stable. Commercial property does this all the time. Retail does it. Right now, retail is having all kinds of crazy problems. Macy's was in the paper again today, about to fire a bunch of people and let people just do the TJ Maxx, kind of where you buy your stuff online and go into the store and pick it up. That doesn't happen with residential property. When you have AT&T move out of a downtown office building and they vacate 400,000 square feet and move to Dallas, that thing just went from a $40 million office building to maybe an $8 million office building on the income approach. So if you cap that artificially at 5%, and then it's leased up to Verizon next year, and it should be 40 or 50 million, it'll be eons before you ever get to that number, no matter what the cap is. So for that reason, and for selfish reasons, commercial litigants, not the owners, but the litigators, will never let that happen. You'll never see a cap on commercial property. I don't know if we'll see a cap on residential. It's been proposed every session for the last 10 years.
now I'm confused by what you just said. Are you suggesting that there is no 10% cap on commercial property?
There
on
is
the
no.
appraised?
There is no cap on commercial property. There's no cap on non-residential property, non-homesteaded residential property. If you have investment
It's news
duplexes.
to me because I thought there was 10% on everything.
No,
so-
sir,
Okay.
not so.
Which is why commercial property, or people that own commercial properties are trying to say, use that in-the-middle technique. What did you call that?
Equal and uniform appeals.
Okay, in-the-middle technique, so it lowers their assessed value, so they're not paying it. I understand now. Thank you.
Sure. My
Anything?
offer is open. If you want me to, I'll meet with your folks however many times a year it needs to happen. You're only 5 minutes, 10 minutes from my front door. Happy to do it anytime. Not afraid of taxpayers. Most of them just want somebody to tell them the right answer.
Okay. Anything else? Cynthia, Paul,
Thank you.
anything? Okay, Michael,
Thank
hey,
y'all for
we
having
appreciate
me.
it.
It's good to see you again.
Likewise.
Next time you're in the office, please let me know. Again, that cell number is 392-3043. Please feel free to use it.
Okay, thanks.
Good night.
Okay, next up is item 7, a resolution for approving the Bear County Hazard Mitigation Plan. And that's item number 7, so we'll get right to that. You have that in your packet, along with some general information. And if we have any questions, we have Rick here, we have the chief here, and Josh is here for their particular parts of this. And we will be coming back the next meeting with some grant applications pertaining to this item also. So if we can have a motion and a second to discuss this resolution
Mr. Mayor,
and approving it. Go ahead.
make a motion, we discuss, take action on 7.
We have a motion from Buys. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Fredericks. Okay, Bert?
Okay, I guess my first question is, who actually did all this? Did Public Works do most of the work on this, putting this together?
Are you referring to,
The different projects?
For us, starting with page 116,
Yes, sir.
yeah, it was at this point, Josh and Rick and Susan Darst and the fire department, Rick Wall and Chief Daughtry
Okay,
on their parts of the fire part of it.
okay. These are worthwhile projects. Good work, whoever did it. My question is this going to be, or is this going to be, the way this is going to be funded, is this, we're applying for grants and we'll match the funds, or how does it going to work? Or it depends on each grant?
Rick?
Does that?
let me
Is that a
back-
fair
let me-
question?
Let me back up here just to tell you exactly what it is this is doing tonight. So Bear County hired, I believe, H2O Partners to do a hazard mitigation plan for the entire county, okay? They're required by law to do it every so often. I believe it's every 5 years, if I'm correct. Municipalities that are within Bear County can either opt in or opt out of this hazard mitigation plan. And if you opt in, H2O Partners worked with all of us that wanted to participate to incorporate individual projects that we thought were important within our communities. I am happy to say I believe that Josh and Susan and the fire department did an exceptional job of influencing, if you will, H2O to include all of the projects that we wanted within the hazard mitigation plan, and we probably have a better product here than most other suburban communities within Bear County, at least from what I've seen. But nonetheless, what this resolution does is it approves the Bear County Hazard Mitigation Plan and our inclusion of our projects into it. At that point, they send that resolution. Bear County will collect all of them from the suburban cities that have participated, and they will send that to FEMA up in Washington, D.C., who will certify it that it is the official hazard mitigation plan for the county and all of these entities that are partnering or contributing to it. We would not be able, it's my understanding, and the chief can speak to this if I'm incorrect, but it's my understanding that we would not be able to we would not be able to apply for grants that are offered by FEMA if we were not included in this plan, in the Bear County Hazard Mitigation Plan. And so we have included a variety of projects that frankly are outstanding from all of the projects that we have, at least on the public works side, and I'll let Fire talk about what they contributed if that's necessary. But from the public works side, these are the outstanding projects that we have not received funding for or had somebody want to fund for us, if you will, that being TxDOT or Bear County. So included in here is the Antonio Drive drainage improvements, which is in dire need of improvement. The Cedar Trail culvert at Bandera Road.
Rick, can I ask you something about the Cedar Trail, please? Is it okay? I thought TxDOT had already funded that project.
They have said that they have funded it or that they will incorporate it into a future fiscal year's budget. This is basically hedging our bets.
Okay, gotcha. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Paragon Road at Indian Trail, there's a very undersized culvert at that location, and then 3 sets of remotely operated floodgates along Scenic Loop Road. When we worked with San Antonio River Authority, there were other projects that we wanted to address throughout the community. One being Calabra Creek tributary that flows through Beverly Hills and Doheny and across FM 1560, and also a portion of Braun Road and Leslie Road where they meet that is frequently underwater. San Antonio River Authority was not able to give us a expanded report on what we should do in those areas, and so they suggested that we do some additional study, and we incorporated that into the FEMA grant as well. I know that the fire department included quite a few other things. Did you want to speak to what those are? Okay. We also included carport shelters for the police, fire, EMS, and public works departments
Rick?
in here.
I thought we had already done that before. We'd already budgeted for that. No?
We have
The
budgeted.
carport?
Yes.
Yeah, we've budgeted.
But
we just haven't done
I
it
see
yet.
you're still just going to ask for money.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
And then it goes on and on. More improvements to the EOC, NOAA weather radios by residents, tree trimming programs, more radios, educating the public on tornadoes and high winds, developing and implementing a shaded fuel break or fuel reduction project to prevent the spread of wildfires, trying to have more subdivisions or more communities within the city gain Firewise designations, so on and so forth. So what we will do, July 22nd, the grant submittals are due to FEMA by July 31st. On the construction projects that we've incorporated in here, we will submit those to y'all for approval prior to us sending them to FEMA, because they do require a match. It's my understanding that they're a 25% match on each one of those grants, which could mean considerable matching dollars on our behalf, but paying 25% is far better than paying 100% of a project, so.
And that's on all projects, 25%? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay.
Anything else?
No, sir.
Paul?
No, I thought it was pretty complete and thorough. The only question I had was about the carports and then dams. I didn't know we had any upstream dams that we were.
It's my understanding that that dam is the San Antonio Ranch Mud Dam. Is that correct? There's something in one of the grants is talking about the dam that's hazard, and I'm assuming that's the San Antonio Ranch Mud Dam that's there.
There is one up there, but there's another one further up off Monroe Lane up in there that was a threat for failure probably about 12 or more years ago. American Dam. So the whole point with that, ma'am,
Sure. Yeah, that was the time you're talking about, they evacuated part of Gray Forest anticipating that dam was going to
yes, sir.
fail.
And I'll go back if there's a specific question. I would like to mention one thing, that tonight what's before you is the hazard mitigation plan. And it's a plan, first of all, to identify the hazards that the natural type hazards, weather type hazards, wildfire, and flooding is obviously one of the biggest hazards that we face in the city of Helotes. This is a plan to, number one, identify your hazards, and then come up with some ideas on how you can mitigate those hazards. The grant is tied to this. In other words, you have to have this plan before you can apply for these grants. But what's before you tonight is not a grant package.
Correct.
That's what's coming before the council next meeting or whenever you have that in the near future. It's a July deadline, I believe.
July 27th is what we're shooting for.
So I would just like to make sure that you understand what you're looking at tonight is simply a plan of identifying those hazards and some ways to mitigate those hazards. But again, you have to have this plan. I don't know that it's necessary that each grant that you may apply for in the future is identified in the plan, but the hazard needs to be identified in the plan, if I'm making sense. Things may change, and it's a 5-year plan.
In other words, this is just a brainstorming effort on everything that we could think of that might be a hazard that needed to be addressed as part of this overall plan. And then as we get to where we're submitting grant applications, if it's in here, it gives us a better chance of getting that grant, I suppose. Understand? Okay, thanks, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Cynthia, any comments? Alex?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's a wonderful and comprehensive list. I'm curious, though, this is not only strictly within the city boundaries then? There may be some areas that we're talking about that are outside of the city boundaries that might also impact the city? Is that as well? Because I don't think that the Braun and Leslie Road is within the city limits of Helotes.
From
It's
the
actually San Antonio, that intersection is.
From the public works side, we focused on what was impacting not only the corporate city limits, but also the ETJ. And in particular, how emergency response would be impacted to get to parts of our corporate city limits. This was prior to us discovering that, or us knowing that TxDOT was going to for sure build the bridge on 1560 that would make an all-weather hazards crossing. And so when we started thinking about this, we said, well, if you can't make it across 1560, for example, they can go the Braun Road route to make it to Beverly Hills. So that was where the thinking came into play.
Good, thank you. I think it's a great list.
Okay, thanks. Just as a reminder, back in 2008, we formed a partnership with San Antonio River Authority and TxDOT and identified 6 projects that we felt were imperative that we do something about, and 2 of them are underway right now. One is the flood control project over at the French Creek tributary. That was one major area, and of course, as you probably recall, that's being covered 100% of the $5 million project cost by Bexar County Flood Control Program, so that was one of our initial 6. The second of our initial 6 that was submitted due to that partnership is the new bridge being built down here on 1560 to replace a 30-inch culvert that's been there for years, and it got to be a very nominal rain would defeat 1560 and water would go over it. And like Rick said, or the chief said, we couldn't get emergency vehicles from one side to the other. 3 of these projects, the Antonio Road culvert improvement, the Paragon Indian Trail culvert improvement, and then, of course, Cedar Trail, those 3 were also part of that 6 project capital improvement plan. So I guess it's just showing that we don't forget, and we keep asking for money for these things in hopes that we'll get it. And so I think it's important to know that some of this dates all the way back to 2006 and work that we did back then. So other than that, it's just a matter of approving this resolution so that we can submit it to Bexar County as part of the process, and then we'll be bringing some of this material back to you at the next meeting for approval of that. So any comments beyond that? Bert, any follow-up?
No.
Paul?
No, sir.
Cynthia?
No.
Alex? Well, I notice here we didn't put discuss and take action on that I see here, but that is the intent here, is to take action on this resolution as presented in your packet. So we have a motion and a second and no further request for discussion. So we'll call the question for approval of the resolution to be submitted to Bexar County. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries. The resolution is approved. And I want to thank Josh and Susan and Rick and the fire department for the work they've put into this, and the work is not over. There's a lot more to be done, but we've got some great staff here, and we'll be coming back to you in a couple of weeks. Okay. Well, that takes care of our agenda for tonight. And so if there are no objections, we will adjourn. No objections being heard, we're adjourning at 8:20. Thank you very much.